Hi and welcome. This week I'm taking a ride on the KTM Super Duke 1290. Now I've never ridden a KTM before, so I was really looking forward to this. Now KTM, which were formed in around 1981, can trace their roots back all the way to 1934. But primarily they're known for dirt bikes and motocross bikes. And it wasn't until 1994 that they produced their first road bike, the Duke Motard. And it wasn't till around 2006-2007 when the first Super Duke came out, which was the 990. That was updated in 2013 to the 1290, which is what this particular one is here. This is a 2013 1290 Super Duke. So it's the closest relative to the current model and shares a lot of the componentry with the current model. Now I'll have to say that I'm a bit of a fan for naked bikes. When you get older, you don't bend as well as you do when you're younger, so you actually look fondly at this sort of upright riding position. And you certainly look for a comfortable seat, which this bike certainly has. Now the riding position is a very neutral upright riding position. I found with my 6 foot height that the foot pegs and the bars were in a really nice, comfortable position for me. And I haven't adjusted anything. This is just the way the bike came. I'm not quite sure whether these are the factory positions for the bars, but from looking at it, it appears to be. Now, the first thing that surprised me was how docile this bike was around town. It has, once it's underway, it's very light, it's nimble, its steering is neutral, its power delivery is certainly at the lower RPMs, very mild and very forgiving, and it certainly would be a really good everyday bike, that you could use for commuting during the week and also for weekend rides through the hills where you can ride it with a little bit more spirit. Speaking of the hills, this bike can really hammer through the corners. Once you get the engine up around 6,000 RPM and open that throttle, it really takes off. It red lines at around 10,500 RPM, so you've certainly got plenty of horsepower there at your fingertips. The factory quote on this particular model around 180 horsepower, and that's at the crank. Overseas magazines have tested them and they've come up with around 160 horsepower, a little more, a little less at the rear wheel, which is certainly an impressive amount of horsepower for a naked bike. Suspension wise, we've got a 48mm white power upside down fork at the front, which has compression damping on the left and rebound on the right. It doesn't seem to have any form of spring preload on the front. And the rear is taken care of again with a white power remote reservoir shock, which is fully adjustable with compression and rebound damping and spring rate. Now I found the suspension moderately firm. It certainly wasn't too firm for day-to-day riding, and once you got the bike up over 80 kilometres per hour, it certainly smoothed out. You'd probably find for a track day or really hard riding, you'd want to stiffen up the front and back a little bit, but for country roads, particularly out here in Australia where they're pretty average, you probably want to keep it a little bit on the softer side because you're not going to be going super hard through the country anyway. You're really doing medium to moderate speeds through the quarters. Braking wise, we have two 320mm discs at the front, which are gripped by two monoblock 4-piston Brembos, and they're mated to a radial mount master cylinder. Now the braking is certainly superb on this bike. There's a lot of feel through that lever, so you can brake gently or aggressively, and there's also an anti-lock braking system as well to take care of any traction issues. The rear has a 220mm disc, which is gripped by a twin piston Brembo caliper. Now the engine is a 75-degree twin, which is an unusual angle. The Aprilias are a 60-degree V-twin. Ducatis are typically a 90-degree V-twin. So this sort of sits in the middle, and it does require a balancer shaft, which it has, to smooth out any vibration. There's a little bit of vibration at lower RPMs, but it's certainly quite a smooth motor for a V-twin. Now the engine is water cooled, it has 4 valve heads, and in an unusual feature, it actually has twin plugs in those 4-valve heads. They seem to have a plug in the centre, and there's also seems to be a plug mounted off to one side there. Now wheel-wise, we've got magnesium wheels at both ends. They're both 17-inch wheels. The front one carries a 120 by 70 section tyre, and the rear carries a 190 by 55 section tyre. One other thing I forgot to mention about the engine is that it uses a fly-by-wire ECU. There's no actual cable connection between the throttle and the throttle body. The ECU takes care of all that for you. And certainly there is no hesitation or flat spots in the fueling of this bike. It also has effectively 4 modes of traction control. There's a rain mode, a road mode, a sport mode, and you can turn the traction control off completely. Now, price-wise, you can get a 2013 model like this in Australia somewhere between $15,000 and $17,000, depending on the number of kilometres it's done and the condition. And considering that a new 2017 model costs closer to $25,000, that's quite a significant saving. So if you have the chance, it would be well worth riding a 2013 or a slightly later model and comparing it to the latest model and seeing if you need that extra bit of horsepower and those updates that they've done. I mean, the 2017 is probably a superb motorcycle, but then so is this. And for the average intermediate rider, you probably won't know the difference, and you could save yourself a bundle there. Now, if we look at the fit and finish of the bike, KTM have done a really good job on most of the components here. The foot pegs are really nice. It's running a single-sided swing arm. There is a trellis frame, very reminiscent in some respects to the Ducati Monster frame. The handlebars are a taper bar. The switchgear is really good quality. The left-hand switchgear contains a set of buttons for adjusting your traction control and your anti-lock braking and such. The instruments, there's 2 LCD panels and an analog tacho. I really do like analog tachos. I guess I'm a little bit old school in that respect. Now, the LCD display on the right contains your speedo, fuel and engine temperature gauge, whereas the LCD display on the left is used for setting various functions, and you can display a number of optional things in there. So you can set your traction control modes, your braking modes and such like on there. Styling wise, it has quite an aggressive sort of naked bike style, which this sort of aggressive styling started off in the early 2000s. I mean, the Benelli I own has sort of that sort of transformer-like style, and the KTM carries it to another level. I guess you either like it or you hate it. I actually find it quite nice myself. Colour-wise, they come in 2 colours, either the KTM orange, which I find quite appealing, or there's a 2-tone grey, which is a little bit more stealth-like. In conclusion, I just have to say that if you are looking at a naked bike and you want something that is suitable for day-to-day use around town, commuting and such like, but also is going to be quite a weapon in the hills, it's certainly well worth checking out the KTM Super Duke. I'd also like to thank A1 Motorcycles in Ringwood, Victoria for loaning me this Super Duke for this test ride, and you can find their contact details in the description below. I'll see you next time.